A platform allows participation without obligation. Access is open, but contribution is optional. This creates a structure where visibility depends on who chooses to engage, not who is present. Participation begins to concentrate unevenly. Each user group evaluates engagement against opportunity cost. Time and attention are allocated only where perceived benefit justifies the effort. Low-return spaces are ignored even if they remain accessible. Selective engagement starts shaping where activity accumulates. As some users engage more frequently, their contributions become more visible. Visibility reinforces the likelihood of further interaction around the same contributors. Other participants observe but do not match the same level of activity. Participation begins to cluster around a subset of users. This clustering is not driven by exclusion, but by differential engagement thresholds. Users with higher tolerance for opportunity cost remain active across more interactions. Others participate sporadically or withdraw entirely. The system shifts toward a participation imbalance. A contrast emerges between access and activity. Everyone can participate, but not everyone finds it rational to do so consistently. The system appears inclusive at the rule level, but selective at the behavioral level. Inclusion does not translate into equal participation. As active users dominate visible interactions, their presence defines perceived norms. New participants entering the system encounter an already skewed activity landscape. Matching the dominant level of engagement requires higher cost commitment. Entry barriers emerge without any formal restriction. This dynamic creates a feedback loop between visibility and engagement. Higher visibility increases interaction probability, which justifies continued engagement. Lower visibility reduces expected return, discouraging further participation. The gap between active and inactive users widens. Another contrast forms between intention and outcome. The system intends to enable broad participation through optional access. However, optionality introduces variability in engagement decisions. The resulting pattern contradicts the expectation of balanced participation. Selective visibility reinforces this divergence. Content from active participants is surfaced more frequently. Inactive or low-frequency contributors receive minimal exposure. Attention distribution becomes increasingly concentrated. Users responding to this distribution adjust their behavior. Some increase engagement to compete for visibility. Others reduce participation due to low expected return. Strategic divergence deepens participation asymmetry. Coordination across user groups weakens. Shared spaces no longer reflect the full population of participants. Interaction becomes dominated by those consistently present. System representation diverges from system membership. A measurable distortion appears in participation metrics. Activity levels suggest high engagement, but only within a subset of users. The broader population remains underrepresented in observable interactions. Perceived participation overstates actual distribution. The system continues to reward optional participation through benefit access. However, the cost of sustained engagement remains unevenly distributed. Only certain users consistently absorb this cost. Participation inequality stabilizes through repeated adaptation. A contrast persists between passive presence and active contribution. Many users remain within the system but do not engage visibly. Their absence from interaction loops reinforces the dominance of active participants. Visibility becomes decoupled from total user base. Over time, engagement patterns become predictable. High-frequency participants maintain their position through continuous activity. Low-frequency participants remain peripheral or exit interaction loops. Behavioral roles solidify within the system. Selective engagement becomes the default strategy. Users no longer evaluate participation globally, but locally, based on return signals. This fragments interaction across the platform. Unified participation gives way to segmented activity zones. The system no longer requires explicit rules to shape behavior. The combination of optional participation and opportunity cost is sufficient. Users self-select into levels of engagement without coordination. Structural asymmetry emerges without direct enforcement. Participation imbalance persists even as new users enter. Incoming participants adapt to the existing distribution rather than resetting it. The system absorbs new actors without altering its structure. imbalance reproduces across time, the platform stabilizes into a skewed participation equilibrium. A minority of users generates the majority of visible activity. The majority remains passive or intermittently engaged. Optional participation solidifies into uneven participation stability. As participation concentrates, the marginal value of additional engagement changes unevenly. Active participants face diminishing incremental visibility gains, yet maintain activity to preserve position. Less active users observe low probability of visibility improvement relative to cost. Participation thresholds harden, reducing upward mobility within the system. This creates a time horizon mismatch across user groups. Active participants operate on long-term visibility accumulation, justifying sustained engagement. Others evaluate participation on short-term return, leading to intermittent or no engagement. Divergent time horizons reinforce separation between persistent and peripheral participants. Information asymmetry begins to widen within the platform. Active users generate and interact with more content, gaining better visibility into system dynamics. Less active users lack feedback signals about how participation translates into outcomes. Decision-making quality diverges, further skewing engagement distribution. A feedback loop emerges between information access and participation strategy. Better informed participants refine their engagement to maximize visibility returns. Less informed participants fail to adjust effectively and withdraw or remain passive. Strategic advantage compounds for already active users. Scaling amplifies the imbalance rather than smoothing it. As the user base grows, total participation opportunities increase unevenly. Active participants absorb a disproportionate share of these opportunities due to established visibility. Growth expands the gap instead of redistributing activity. A contrast appears between system growth and participation diversity. More users enter the platform, but visible interaction remains concentrated. The system appears active at scale while underlying participation remains narrow. Surface-level growth masks deepening imbalance. Cross-actor feedback loops intensify within active groups. Active participants primarily interact with each other, reinforcing mutual visibility. Peripheral users remain outside these interaction loops, receiving limited exposure. Interaction networks become increasingly closed and self-reinforcing. This closure introduces structural inertia into participation patterns. Breaking into established interaction loops requires disproportionate engagement effort. Most users rationally avoid this cost, accepting lower participation levels. The system resists rebalancing even without explicit barriers. Selective visibility further stabilizes this inertia. Algorithms or exposure mechanisms prioritize already active contributors. This reinforces the expectation that participation must meet a high activity threshold. Lower intensity engagement becomes systematically undervalued. At this stage, participation decisions become path-dependent. Early engagement patterns influence long-term visibility trajectories. Users who did not establish early presence face compounding disadvantages. Initial conditions lock into persistent participation roles. An analytical tension appears around reversibility. If optional participation created the imbalance, increased engagement should theoretically rebalance it. However, the accumulated visibility advantage of active users raises the cost of catching up. The system allows participation shifts in theory, but constrains them in practice. As a result, adaptation strategies converge towards stability rather than change. Active users maintain engagement to defend position, even with lower marginal returns. Inactive users minimize engagement due to persistent low payoff expectations. Both strategies reinforce the existing distribution. Participation imbalance becomes self-maintaining through expectation alignment. Users anticipate the same distribution continuing into the future. These expectations shape current behavior, reducing attempts to alter position. The system stabilizes through coordinated inaction and persistence. Over time, observable participation ceases to reflect potential participation capacity. The system's visible layer represents only the behavior of consistently active users. Latent participation remains unexpressed due to cost and low expected return. Measured engagement diverges structurally from actual user potential. This divergence introduces rigidity into system evolution. Changes in user base or content supply do not significantly alter participation structure. Existing engagement patterns absorb variation without redistributing activity. The system becomes resistant to endogenous change. Ultimately, the interaction loop between optional participation, opportunity cost, and selective visibility tightens. Each reinforces the others without requiring external intervention. Participation asymmetry persists as a stable outcome of repeated rational adaptation. The system locks into skewed participation stability. Under this equilibrium, the system rewards sustained engagement with continued visibility and interaction access. Participants who maintain consistent activity retain their position within the interaction loop, even as marginal returns decline. Maintaining presence becomes more valuable than optimizing individual contributions. At the same time, the system increasingly ignores low-frequency participation. Contributions from intermittent users fail to accumulate enough visibility to alter their position. Irregular engagement no longer functions as a viable path to participation. Opportunity cost becomes an implicit penalty mechanism. Users who do not commit sustained time and attention lose access to interaction loops dominated by active participants. Reduced visibility reinforces their exclusion without any explicit restriction. Compared to the initial state of open and equal access, participation is now filtered through engagement persistence. The system no longer distributes visibility broadly, but concentrates it among those who absorb ongoing participation cost. Access remains unchanged, but outcomes are structurally constrained. Participation stabilizes around this asymmetry. A minority continues to engage to preserve visibility, while the majority rationally limit or withdraw participation. The system sustains uneven participation without needing to enforce it directly.